he was out for dinner with the buying parties and doing their negotiations. And at the table next to him, someone, walked into the restaurant and shot the person dead.
Welcome again to the Dead Dads podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Peter Reek. He's going to tell us a little bit about his dad, Bill Reek. Bill was a commodities trader basically his whole life. He worked for Nestle and he was a stable guy. He was the anchor of his family. His whole personality for Peter was about consistency. But I think you're going to enjoy a little anecdote that Peter tells about Bill's kind of wild trip down to Colombia and some pretty unorthodox tactics that go on down there. It's a reminder that even the most stable, predictable dads have sometimes hidden or wild stories that we didn't expect. You might also be noticing I'm wearing a little bit of Dead Dads merch. Is it for sale? Not yet. But if you're interested, leave a note in the comments. Also, you're probably going to notice that Roger isn't here today. He's not in the studio with us. And so he was away on a business trip, and it was a kind of a curious question. Roger, what do you think of this episode?
Please accept my apologies for not making it into this episode. I was out of town on business in Colombia. I'm not allowed to really talk about it, but enjoy this really great interview with Peter Reek. I think you're going to find it of just tons of value. The second ask is we've added a link to buy us a coffee in our descriptions across all the different podcast platforms. Which is so ironic because I don't have coffee with me right now. That's because we haven't asked you yet. It costs a little bit of money to make this podcast, our studio space, plus some of the design work and promotion. We want to make it as high quality as possible. And we're wondering if you have found this podcast to be of value to you and you have it in you to make a little donation. We would truly appreciate it. It helps us keep the doors open to this podcast and get it into as many of the right ears and eyes as possible, and that is all the men out there who have lost their dad or are about to lose their dad. So if you could make that donation, that would be absolutely unbelievable. Anyways, thanks so much, guys. Let's bring on Peter Reek.
But we're here to help you laugh. It's the Dead Dads podcast.
Peter.
Scott.
Welcome to the Dead Dads podcast.
So good. So good.
Thank you so much for coming. I know it has been, Peter and I have had a little bit of a back and forth. We were trying to get this organized, but I appreciate you coming today. I appreciate you talking to us. I want to start off by asking you, why did you decide to come on this podcast? Why did you decide to do it today? Why did you decide that it was the right time?
This type of dialogue around someone who played such a formative place in my life, someone else who's interested in talking about dads, it just felt like, yeah, I'll take that challenge up.
Let me get to know him a little bit. What was his name?
My dad's name was William Charles Reek, and he was affectionately Bill.
Bill. You gave me some fascinating data on him. Can you tell me a little bit about who he was? He was a commodities trader?
He traded commodities. He bought commodities, and in some cases sold commodities for Nestle. So one of the largest consumer goods company in the world. So he was buying sugar, cocoa, coffee from all over, honey. I remember going on trips with him to Alberta to explore honey farms. He was responsible for making sure that they had the commodities that they needed to manufacture their products in Canada.
So, and this was all, he was born and raised in Ontario?
Guelph, Ontario. Yeah, he was born and raised in Guelph. Moved our family, I wasn't born yet, but moved the family to Etobicoke, like right by the airport.
Okay, so he was born and raised in Ontario and Etobicoke for a long portion of time. Started out, he went to school there. How did he get into trading for Nestle, which is a fairly well-known entity? Did he just stumble on a lucky break? Was that sort of his intention?
He had to grow up quickly. He and my mom got married quite young, so he had to grow up quite quickly and he had such a intense focus on being a good provider that he just immediately went to work. So I think he started with a company called Standard Brands which was, I think Purina was part of their offering in Guelph, and then he applied for a position with Nestle in Toronto, and that was the beginning of the move to Etobicoke.
So you said he got he got married early, and so this was maybe the genesis. He's got to get to work because he's starting out on his journey of life.
We're gonna make it, hun. We're gonna make it. I'm gonna go get a job, and we're gonna make it, because the whole history of them coming together is quite a story. But the reality was there was a child coming shortly after they were married, and my dad, being the steady provider that he was, this was his sole focus. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that would have that story, especially in that era of time of you're sort of in a path, right? You get married, when's the kid coming, the house and stuff like that. So they were fast on that path.
They were quick on that path.
But that child wasn't you.
No, that was my sister.
That was your sister.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So
she's since passed, and that's we could have a podcast about her as well. But so it was my sister.
Okay, so older sister since passed, and I'm sorry to hear. And then they're established. He's growing his business and growing in responsibility.
Growing in responsibility. I think, his dedication, his work ethic. He was so good with facts and figures and retention, and he just grew quickly. So I think I remember when he became a director, because I think we had a family celebration around that, and then he was elevated to VP.
Wow.
Big step for him.
And so
that's with no education, no post-secondary education. So
just grit, hard work, determination, those things that, right.
Yeah.
And you're witnessing all of this and sort of like, oh, this is the roadmap that's sort of laid out for me to a certain degree. This is how he succeeded.
Yeah. And we have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, but that was, that I had a chance to watch somebody who takes providing for their family pretty seriously.
So he's a growing, I guess he's a executive, right? Growing in an executive, and you're obviously.
I have this epic picture of him, black and white. Looks like it's straight out of interview for a magazine. All the Nestle products behind him on a white shelf, horn rim glasses, narrow tie. It's an epic shot, and I love that shot.
So as he's growing, is he? Sometimes the life of an executive, is he away a lot? Like in your childhood, how connected is he with some of your other memories of growing up?
Yeah, no, not away too much, enough, and usually well planned. So I didn't feel like he was absent on the road kind of dad, but sometimes his trips were extended. So he would have to spend a month in England quite regular, annually, and make periodic trips down to places like Colombia.
I would love for you to tell a little bit about some of the more wild maybe aspects of his life. I know there's definitely some more unstable places that he went to, and I also believe stability is sort of part of his brand.
For me, my dad was the cornerstone of stability. My mom is still with us, and she's moved from Ontario here, and I'm caregiving for her. And stability, he continues to provide for her. So everything about my dad was anchored in stability for me, which at times was comforting, and other times frustrating.
Yeah, because there's sometimes the flip side is lack of spontaneity or a lack of open to fresh ideas. Stability is consistency in a lot of ways.
I've spent my life building entrepreneurial things, and we would collide sometimes in our values on the stability versus risk.
Can you tell me maybe a quintessential story that he loved to tell? One of his best stories about his work, or just about who he was as a person?
So he's on a trip in Colombia, buying whatever it is he's buying. I'm sure it was some level of coffee to be eventually become Nescafe or something along those lines. And he was out for dinner with the buying parties and doing their negotiations. And at the table next to him, someone, walked into the restaurant and shot the person dead. What
era, the 70s, 80s?
So I think this is going to be late 70s, early 80s. Yeah.
So he's at a table.
Well, actually, they ended up under the table because everybody knew what to do, apparently, because it was Colombia. But so this was the realities of Mr. Safety going negotiating, get the best deal for the company, and, essentially having someone get shot who was probably trading another type of substance, is my guess.
I would be like, how did you get through that? And how are you okay? And I'm sort of picturing him telling this story in a stable way, like, so I ordered the appetizer and and then midway through the appetizer, you're like, just skip to the part where the the dealer, how did he tell it? I guess that maybe, is it in his voice, in his brand? Did he tell it in a stable way?
There was a certain level of like telling it with assurances. Everybody knew what to do. Like this was just kind of par for the course there, Peter. But I was still fascinated. Yeah. So he did have a level of calm about sharing it.
So you mentioned this originally, or just shortly, which is that there was a lot of things that you shared that were similar, but you maybe evolved more of an entrepreneurial
right.
as you got older. And so were there areas where the two of you had, I don't know about disagreements, but where you fractured? Because that's part of growing up as a kid as well, as you idolize your parents and then you start to realize there's a separation. So how did that work with him when you started to see sort of like a different path for yourself? Was he, I guess, overall probably supportive, or was he initially hesitant? How was that?
A lot of it was cultural. He worked for the same company, outside of that 1 year at Standard Brands. He worked for Nestle for his entire career. So, that was the thinking that he would bring to the mix. On one hand, he was quite steady, but he was also a little bit encouraging on the entrepreneurial front. Later, as I walk through this, I feel like much of the reason why I could feel free to entrepreneur was because of the steadiness.
Well, he's probably thinking if he can survive an execution, he can handle
I think
your upbringing.
I think there's part of him that was like, maybe I can live a little vicariously through your entrepreneuring, because he was a business person. He wasn't, none of that was lost on him. One of the things that was always baffling to me, like I just couldn't understand it at all, was he knew the commodity market like so well, and he wouldn't put a dime of his own money into it. So, and partially because he knew it so well, and he could, he knew the perils of that. But I think of the possibilities that might have existed for him if he had have allowed himself to have a little account.
So that's excellent. So again, the entrepreneurship has sort of come organically, but definitely supported by him. He sounds like an incredible guy.
Supported cautiously. Let's just put it that way.
Or stably.
Yes, stably. Yeah.
The watchword. Yeah. Do you mind if I ask how he passed? So you sort of talked a little bit about this, but how did he pass away? Was it over a portion of time? Was there a mark where you noticed that he was degrading? What was the timeline like, and how was it for you?
He died at a time when it wasn't possible to have a public gathering. Midwinter, terrible time in Toronto.
And you were here, right?
Truthfully, we were in Cannon Beach, Oregon, and I got the call from my sister to say, I think because we would go to, it was between Christmas and New Year's, so I got the call to come down and for my sister to say, hey, listen, Dad's not good and it doesn't look good, and I think you should consider coming this way. So I went and slept on the floor in the Portland airport to get the first flight out. And unfortunately, my dad passed when I was changing planes in I think it was Denver. I don't even remember where I was. I just remember what I felt, the disappointment I felt standing in that airport, knowing that I wasn't going to get to say goodbye. So he had a couple of rounds of battling cancer. So ultimately, colon cancer was the most prevalent piece that he had to deal with. He did have to deal with testicular cancer a little bit early in his earlier. Well, actually, when the year that I came to university, testicular cancer showed up, and then colon cancer raised its head, and he had a couple of surgeries late past the point when it would probably make sense to have the surgeries. But he managed to successfully get through that. But he had developed COPD, and
which is
cardio something pulmonary disorder. So,
okay.
Yeah. So essentially, like it breaks down to you're able to bring oxygen in, but you're not able to get carbon dioxide out. It was kind of tumultuous. It was Christmas. They were celebrating Christmas with my sister and her husband the day after Christmas, and the basement was flooding. So and my dad was in his spot resting and very frustrated that he couldn't do anything about, because he would have been right up to getting to the source of the leak, and that I think put him into a period of stress. And later that night he went to the hospital in an ambulance and passed away in the ambulance.
Anybody who lives into their 70s, 80s, like the majority of your life, you have been able. And to suddenly not be capable is, I would think, an incredible frustration. So just to ask you, so you mentioned he had first testicular cancer.
Yes.
Right? When
Yes.
you were quite young.
Well, I was in university, so I was somewhere between 18 and 20.
Was that your first sort of blush with mortality? How scary was that? Because there's a moment where your parents are not capable of death, I guess, and then something happens. Was it that moment for you, or was that passed by quite quickly?
So I lived in a dorm, and there was one payphone serving the dorm. So I'm having this conversation with my dad over a payphone in a dorm and thinking, what does this mean? So immediately into the panic state that you do. And I was young enough that I was reassured, my parents could reassure me that this was a type of cancer that they had a high success rate in being able to come up with a treatment plan.
So you hung up that payphone.
I hung up the payphone.
Walked away from there and went, this is sorted. I got a good shot at this. Like, how did it's a long time ago, but do you remember how it sat with you?
And my immediate response on the phone was, hey, well, I'm going to come home. And the immediate response on there is, oh no, you'll finish out this year because we've got this handled.
So then he's obviously successfully passes through that. And then how much is the gap for the colon cancer? That was later on, obviously.
Yeah, I would say 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because my dad retired also while I was at university.
So that colon cancer was the start, I guess, if you like, of his eventual decline.
Yeah.
So I might ask, so you've obviously survived the first time and then years have passed. And so you're older now. When that announcement arrives, what's your first response? What do you think? Like, I remember the last time this happened, like he's a strong guy, or do you start to think, oh, okay, but he's older now? How do you receive that information? I
wasn't panicked, and neither were they. I was kind of at the stage of life where I could be an active participant. I, was back here for all the surgeries. It was more of a let's get solution focused about this and let's make safe decisions around treatment. We were making the decisions together. My sister came from the nursing profession, so she had contributions to make it as well.
So you were participatory, but ultimately
his decision on what he was going to do. And in my parents' relationship, my dad was all thinking and my mom was all feeling. So
I know you mentioned this, but so obviously he gets progressively sicker, and you start to be aware like there's an end point that could come. Is that right? So you're cautious about everything you're doing because you're thinking, I have to be ready just in case I need to get to him.
You called it out. Like I moved away from home when I was 18 and I never went back. And there's always a sense of a little bit of shirking responsibilities when it comes to parental care on that front. So either that would show up where I'd go back for a week and just try to do so much for my parents in a week and get them set up. Like this week is designed for me to help, put the railings up, get the things down that my parents need because they were quite adamant on not moving out of their home, which I had worked for years to try to get them to move west. So there's that whole guilt of I'm not delivering like a son should. Became a theme.
Your guilt.
Yeah,
about the feeling of what you should have done.
Of how do you set parents up for, aging success when you don't live in the same city as them.
I know from talking to people here and just from my own process, it's an interesting narrative about what is your life for? Like, is your life for you to live, or are you paying back the fact that you were given life by your parents, right? And there's a balance. Should I consistently be taking care of them? But also I have a life to live and I have things that I want to be able to do, and which weighs out more. I think that guilt especially comes to fruition and comes to a finer point when they pass, because you only have so many more opportunities and then they pass. So you mentioned he passed, you were not present when he passed.
No.
So did that turn that knob of guilt up a little bit more because you weren't present when he passed, or
like feverish pitch, turn it up? But there's the regret of just not having that opportunity to say goodbye. So we were there in November, and we had spoken on Christmas Eve, but like not being able to, have that moment of closure. I didn't actually get to see him until it was coffin time.
If you could have seen him,
Yeah.
what would you have said?
I would have expressed appreciation. We haven't chatted about this, but my dad rescued my mom from a really crappy home life, and took him into his family's home, and then eventually they created their own.
And this is why they got married so early.
Yeah, so I think that was who he was. Eliminating harm from someone's life. And my mom became super dependent on my dad. I had finally hit the age where we could talk about some of their early days, and I had never really had a chance to debrief that with my dad and say, hey, listen, I know a lot of your life has been about sacrifice and looking out for others. And
it's a topic that I feel like actually has been explored too, which is if some of the people that we've spoken to would love to go back and actually get to know, as an adult, get to know their dads a little bit better and say, hey, tell me the real story, not the cleansed version when I was a kid. Tell me about what it was like rescuing somebody. Like, how did you deal with that? How did you take on all this extra responsibility? Because it sounds like he's quite early in his life still, and he's taking this on. I think given the extra time, I don't know, it sounds like, not to put words, but maybe that's the question. How did you do this?
True confessions from a story perspective. I mentioned they had built an apartment in our house, and that ultimately ended up in kind of an altercation between my mom and myself. And my mom actually made a decision to fly home. So, and my dad, in my estimation, would have just said, yeah, we're going to go. I'm going to go support your mother. But my dad stayed. And so my mom flew home and my dad stayed, and we had pub nights and great. So I kind of did have a little bit of that experience that you're explaining.
So your mom and you had a discussion that resulted in an altercation.
Yeah.
And
I really want my mom to listen to this, and now I'm thinking maybe I won't share it with her, but
it's your choice.
But I got to spend some good one-on-one time with my dad that I hadn't expected that I would have.
I just want to check in with you. I think there obviously the opportunity to talk to your dad wasn't something that you were able to have at those last minutes, but you said you were able to see him again at coffin time.
Yes.
So
at coffin time, yeah.
he was buried? Was he cremated? Was that your
cremation,
responsibility? Or
I am the activator in the family, and so we made. You would not believe the number of decisions that we made in the space of 24 hours, which included hiring a restoration company with respect to the flooding that I was telling you about, and getting burial plots and finding cemeteries and making all the arrangements.
So you had to settle into that position.
That was the role that I played, to come in and here's the list of decisions that need to be made, and let's make them.
Do you think being able to settle into the position of having active work and to be able to own that, does that manage in your mind some of the guilt that you said you were feeling about not necessarily being present all the time? Is there a balance in your life where you're like, okay, I'm going to really put my energy into this?
I think it upped the intensity of those visits. Like, I couldn't just wake up and enjoy coffee when I was in the subsequent visits that I made to go see my mom, including that time. It was much about putting things in place so that my mom could continue to be.
Okay. So it's about resting your father and the decisions but also stepping into the role that he'd occupied for such a long time.
Yes.
And setting her up so that she continued to feel safe. Yeah.
And he had everything was not only tied up with a bow, it had extra ribbon on it and everything. That part wasn't hard.
A lot of people struggle with this, but when your father was in his decline, did you start having conversations where he said, hey, Dad, what would you like? How do I take care of Mom the way you did? ask him those questions? And did you broach the subjects of like, what does that look like for you? What would you like? Did you have the ability to do that with him?
I didn't have to ask a lot of questions because it was pretty much figured out. Where that processing happens for me is, am I that person? It's a real challenge for my dad to me to say, hey, make sure that you set your kids up in the same
style that I set you up?
Yeah. Or in similar, or at least somewhat remotely similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the template that in order to fulfill his wishes, what template do you have to live inside?
Even though he wasn't a big commodities person, he was a great insurance person.
So he passed and he had a very established playbook that was luckily set for you. And so you followed that playbook basically in order to both rest him in a place that felt good and also set your mom up, which you knew was an important thing to do.
Yeah.
So that playbook, I'm sure, didn't go on forever. So at the end of that process, which I assume probably wasn't that long ago, when I think I've done everything that he's done, what happens to your grief? Like, where do you sit at the end of, he's not giving me any more instruction?
I hear his voice a lot, like, and it's usually in more of a guidance format, and it sometimes takes the form of what would my dad do in this scenario. Some moments hit hard when you just really wish that you could just run a scenario by him to get his opinion. I miss not being able to have the conversations, and I feel like we had enough relationship that I could probably figure out where he would lean on certain topics as well.
I firmly feel the same way, which is my father and I were not the same. And I had but the ways that we were not the same were comforting.
Yeah.
And so when I would solicit his advice, I was soliciting what I knew would be the opposite almost. And that would reaffirm my own.
Yeah.
So it was like getting mirror advice. Do you know what I mean? I was looking for him to say what I knew that I thought he was going to say. And when he was absent from that, I suddenly, now I started thinking, is that who I am? So I think I understand the feeling of looking for something reassuring. That voice is still with you, I guess. So in a way, like, he still resides with you.
Like he would always take quiet moments to share a piece of advice with people. And I actually overheard him doing that with some of my daughter's husbands and whatnot. I also, you really miss, we just had our fourth grandchild. And I would love to celebrate that with him.
Did he see any of your grandchildren?
My oldest grandchild is 12. So he had a chance to interact with him quite a bit.
Is there a way, or do you find a way to keep him alive with your grandchildren? How does that work for you?
Well, we still have my mom, right? So, and my mom is actively involved with so she does a good job at regularly referring to him. The grandkids are young enough now that I think in a few years the storytelling of who he was will make more sense to him. But my oldest grandson and I, who I love, and he's we regularly talk about my dad.
Peter, knowing that you've had a while to contemplate this, you had a dad who gave you a playbook and really helped you on the journey. Is there something that you could say to reassure a guy out there that is uncertain? He's approaching the death of his father. Is there some guidance or thought that you could give to that person? And what advice would you offer that person who's maybe contemplating the death of their father, or has just recently, experienced the death of their father?
Be an active participant. Engage in conversation in a way that you'll have things to draw from when he has passed.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a guest on the Dead Dads podcast.
Dead Dads podcast. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you were here.
When I saw you post it that you were doing it, I thought, hey, that sounds interesting. That sounds like a good challenge. Love that.
And thank you. Thank you for another episode of the Dead Dads podcast. Please do us a favor. Please like and subscribe Share this with people that you know are interested. Every comment, every review, even if you're able to just pass it on, we really appreciate it. It's a huge help, and every single person I think that's been on here, myself and Roger, appreciate your efforts. So thank you so much.
It's a weird, sad, funny path, but we're here to help you laugh. It's the